Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Take your seats, please. Mr. Byers, you can begin your convenience with cross-examination of Dr. Marchinsky.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
During your direct examination, you said that you reviewed the toxicology report of Jeremy Martin,
Yes, I did.
and that's page 146,
Yes.
and you used the blood alcohol content of 0.102.
Yes, I think I reported both values on the front page of that report.
You know what the behavioral characteristics of a person at a 0.102 BAC would be, right?
Yes, that's legal intoxication.
But can you describe to the jury exactly what type of characteristics you would expect to see?
You would expect to see prototypical alcohol intoxication. So on the standardized police field sobriety test, you would see things like they would have difficulty standing on one leg, they would have difficulty engaging in any sort of working memory task, like taking the number 100 and subtracting sevens from it. They would have difficulty perhaps following instructions. So if you ask them to walk 10 steps or 7 steps in one direction, they may be able to do that, but then they don't follow the instruction with the correct number of steps. If you look at them in the lab, you'll see reductions in reaction time. You'll see impulsivity that you can measure on a variety of tasks. You can see balance impairments. Do you want more?
Well, I was just wondering about their cognitive ability.
It is impaired. That's why it's legal intoxication, and you're not supposed to drive above 0.08.
But certainly not to the extent of 0.24, right?
No.
Now, you mentioned that you based your analysis on something called the Widmark equation.
Yes.
And you know that equation inside out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you mind using the easel, and if we could, Your Honor, if we could get the assistance of the bailiff to bring that forward so that it could be, so that the doctor could put that on the easel.
The equation,
Yes,
is that
sir.
what you're asking her to, and we don't have that in some form to use on the album?
No, Your Honor, not, not immediately.
The way we're going to do it, Dr. Chinsky, go ahead and bring whatever of the easels. Just go ahead, and I believe you're being asked to write out the formula.
Sure.
Again, you can refer to your notes.
I did forward this to the DA's office. They have my Excel spreadsheet, so do I need to write it down?
Yes, Your Honor. What we're looking for is the exact formula, not an Excel spreadsheet. But remember
The formula is...
No, do not talk over one another. I'm sorry, Mr. Byers. I'm just looking for what is the most convenient method for the jury to see it. And again, because they all have the displays, if we haven't already written, that would be preferable.
That's what I submitted to the DA's office. It has the calculation down here, the steps of the calculation.
That's the easiest thing to use.
No,
Thank you,
Your
Mr.
Honor. I'm sorry, but it's our request that this expert witness provide the equation that she used to the jury so that she can qualify for the members of the jury exactly all of the variables that went into this equation, where they came from, not a conclusion, not some type of spreadsheet.
I don't know if that's an objection to their own question or what, but I'm not sure. We have a panel for an over.
Yes, but I'm sure we have a number of them as well. Go ahead, please. Let me suggest to you already, there is a difficulty from the jury's perspective of being able to see that. And now it's not because anyone's blocking it, it's just the distance of it. So again, I'm wanting to suggest that we use the Elmo so that she can explain a document that the jury can see very closely.
Your Honor, I appreciate the court's guidance, and we'll certainly comply with that. However, what Dr. Marchinsky is writing on that easel is not the Widmark equation. And so if we could have Dr. Marchinsky come to...
And I object. There's no question being asked.
Let me hear. You can't make an objection until I've heard the request.
Counsel's testimony at this point.
So let's just cool down for a little bit. Because I don't have the documents, I haven't seen it, I'm not clear. Again, make the request of what you're asking from the witness that she do.
I'll do that, Your Honor. Dr. Marchinsky, you're next to the right?
Yes, I am.
Certain background. More than the average person.
I probably have more than the average person, but I am a psychologist.
You are a psychologist, you're well versed in mathematics.
Yes.
The Widmark equation is a basic formula, right?
Right.
X equals Y plus Z, whatever. That methodology, correct?
Yes.
Are you able to write the Widmark formula on a piece of paper?
I'm writing it out for you right now.
No, that's not.
Objection, Your Honor. Sorry.
It is at this point that you're asking her to write out the formula, not the steps. You're writing out the formula because you can calculate.
These are the steps. The formula comes from two scientific publications, which I can submit into evidence. One is from the Journal of Studies on Alcohol, and one is from the Forensic Science International. I also double-checked the work on a BAC calculator that comes from the, I'm sorry, I don't have.
Dr. Marchinsky, I think you're only being asked, can you write out the formula?
The formula, I wasn't prepared to, I always calculate BAC this way. It's 3 steps. It is what you see in the lab. If you put in these numbers using these steps, then you will see a BAC, and then you will see the same BAC in the subject. So if I think that you have to.
May I follow up with a question?
Dr. Marchinsky, are you telling the jury that you cannot write out what that basic formula is?
Yeah, I can write the formula off the journal article, sure. Is that what you want?
Well, I think that's the jury's.
Here.
And as big as you're able to, please.
And I can submit the journal article if you'd like.
And for the purposes of the record, can you tell the jury what it is that you have just written?
A equals the amount of alcohol ingested. C0 is the alcohol concentration in the blood at time 0. And then P refers to the body weight. And the Widmark can be adjusted in various ways. Okay.
So are you familiar with an equation where BAC is equal to A times 5.14 over W times R, all in parentheses, minus 0.15 times H?
Well,
Are you familiar with that?
there's various ways you can.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. Is it yes or no? Are you familiar with it?
Can you write out the equation for me so I can take a look at it and then give me the parameters of the items that you are referring to, the letters?
I'll be happy to write it out for you. What I've written for purposes of the record is showing on the Elmo is BAC is equal to, open parentheses, A times 5.14 all over W times R, close parentheses, all minus 0.015 times H. Are you familiar with that formula?
Yeah, there's the 0.15 times H. That's the hours for the metabolism rate. You have the alcohol here, the 5.14. I'm assuming you're calculating the ethanol in milliliters. There's various ways you can calculate the ethanol. It could be in milligrams, it can be in grams, it can be in milliliters, it can be liters. W refers to the body weight of the person, and then I'm assuming that in this formula, the R is the distribution ratio, which you would calculate separately for men and women. So obviously, women have a little bit more body fat. When you drink alcohol, it goes into the liquid of the body. It does not go into fat. It does not go into bones. And that distribution ratio is slightly different for men and women.
And so, what distribution ratio did you use in the case of analysis for the
0.75.
0.75? Mm-hmm. Is there a range that is available to be used for the distribution ratio? There is, isn't there?
The actual breathalyzer reading that I'm going to see, and that's the value that works best.
Their argument is sustained.
Now, directing your attention to the variable W. Variable W. You said earlier that is the weight.
Body weight of the...
And if I'm not mistaken, in your calculations, you used a body weight of, was it 180 to 185 pounds?
Yes, that's...
Exact weight of 84 kilograms.
No, that used 84 kilograms for the point estimate, but then I provided a range, and the range of values included 180 and 185.
180 and 185. And would it surprise you to find out that at the time defendant Chan was booked into the Darien County Jail, he weighed 190 pounds, didn't he?
I didn't receive that information, and it wouldn't make that much difference in BAC. He was 3 times the legal limit.
Sorry, doctor, but a variance of 5 pounds, what do you think?
It's not 5 pounds, it's converted to kilograms.
No, I'm saying the difference between 190 pounds and 185 pounds. That's 5 pounds.
That's a 5-pound difference, yes.
So, now, but you didn't have that information. It wasn't provided to you, right? It wasn't provided to you by the defense, was it?
What he weighed?
His weight at the time he was booked?
No.
Now, this variable A, what did you say that was again?
The amount of alcohol consumed.
Now, what did you base that amount of alcohol consumed on? I think you said that it was receipts, right?
Yes.
And the statements of witnesses, right?
Correct.
Now, you were in the courtroom whenever Nicole James testified, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And you heard her say that she's the defendant's second cousin, right?
Yes, I heard that. It was also on the police report.
Yes, she was. And you read the statements of Josh Sexau.
Correct.
And you know that he's also a very close friend of the defendant's, don't you?
Yes, I know that.
And what about Ian Robles? You read his statement as well, right?
Right.
He's also a good friend of defendant Chance, is he?
No, I don't think so. According to the police report, he didn't really know him all that well.
He didn't know Jeremy Martin either, right?
No.
And any of the statements, any of the content of those statements is absolutely 100% correct and accurate.
That's true with any piece of information like a report.
That's very true. Now, also, you based your analysis of the alcohol consumption, and you mentioned that it was associated with how much food they consumed, right?
Yes.
And the only information that you had about how much food was consumed came from the receipts from the drinking establishments that they had attended. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
So those receipts do not account for how much food they may have consumed before they started drinking at the first drinking establishment. It doesn't account for that, right?
Correct, but the gastric emptying process would have been over for any food that was consumed before 5 p.m. for a shooting that's at 12:20. So when we food deprive people in the lab, we food deprive them for 4 hours so that we can ensure that basically their stomach is empty. So any food consumption that matters would have occurred within 4 hours of the shooting.
Within 4 hours of the shooting?
Right.
So what you're saying is that if somebody eats a greasy, my favorite, green chili cheeseburger, then that's not going to have the impact on the absorption rate or the excretion rate unless it was within 4 hours of the time that you're trying to focus in on?
Well, I did take into account the food that was consumed at between 5 and 6, and that will lower the amount of alcohol absorption for that time period. So for the alcohol that was consumed between 5 and 8 p.m., you have to account for that food intake at that time.
So basically you're agreeing with me that there are a number of variables that, due to no fault of your own, you just could not take them into consideration because you didn't have that information, right?
There are a lot of different variables that could factor in.
Now, your science is evolving, isn't it? It has evolved over time because the Wismark equation came up, when was it, 1931? When it came up with it?
Science is evolving, and yes, the Widmark has been around for decades.
And now, in your report, you mentioned that you used something called a modified Widmark equation. Is that what you wrote up on the easel?
The modified takes into account the distribution differences of body water in men and women. And so I applied the the ratio for men, which is 0.75.
So what are the modifications to the Widmark equation in a formula like we have here on the alcohol? Where would that modification apply?
That modification applies for the amount of alcohol times the body water. So the 5.14.
Here?
Yes, at the top.
And would it be multiplied by another number?
Let me just double check. No, it adjusts the, instead of having the, it would adjust the 5.14 value.
What would it adjust it to?
I don't have those calculations in front of me right now. I gave you the steps so you can see the differences. The differences are rather minor, so you can adjust for men and women. And in the lab, in fact, the differences that we adjust for men and women actually don't make that much difference in the objective BAC.
Excuse me, doctor, but it's your testimony today before this jury that you were testifying and you don't know what the value was that you used in this equation? That you modified the Widmark equation?
I gave you the calculation steps.
That's not my question. Do you know?
Answer the questions before we interrupt.
Is there an objection?
Yes, please don't interrupt the witness while she's answering.
Overruled. The witness has to be responding to the question that's being asked, whether they're an expert or a lay. So again, doctor, if you will please listen to the question, and again, let it be completed before you start giving your response. And please only respond to the question that you asked. This is cross-examination.
So, doctor, you said that you used a modified Widmark equation, provided you the opportunity to tell us what that modification is. You said it's a modification of the number 5.14. It's your testimony today that you do not know what that modification value is. Is that correct?
Like any good scientist, I would never on the fly adjust my values. So I would say I'm not going to testify what exactly the change was without all the Excel spreadsheets in front of me.
Now, you created your first report on May 13th of 2016, right?
Correct. It was for the first trial.
And on direct examination, the defense had asked you, the DA's office had contacted you. We did between the last time you testified and now. He did not contact you, isn't it?
That's correct. You did not.
Okay. And you have not changed your report.
I have not changed my report.
Now, in all of that intervening time, you've had all of the opportunity to review all of the other reports and all of the other exhibits, right?
No, I was not asked to do that.
Oh, the defense didn't ask you to do that?
No.
If I recall your direct testimony correctly, you were saying that engaging in consuming alcohol mixed with energy drinks results in risky behavior. Is that a fair representation of what you were saying?
That's true for alcohol even by itself.
Okay. But in direct response to the question that I asked you, alcohol mixed with energy drinks, AMED, is going to cause people to do things that is rather risky, right?
I wouldn't say it's any riskier than what you would see with the amount of alcohol consumed.
Well, let's delve into that, because you said that one of the reasons that the National Institutes of Health and the FDA and everybody else pulled alcoholic beverages that are mixed with energy drink components off of the shelves was because of the safety concern that it would have on the public if they consumed those, right?
That's correct.
Because in your testimony, they're not able to realize how drunk they are, right?
Correct.
So then that consumption of that would tend to lead them into more risky behavior. Is that correct?
When you drink more, you're less likely to have impulse control, and you're more likely to make risky decisions. The main premise for the FDA for pulling the premixed energy drink products with alcohol off the market is that people were drinking excessive levels of alcohol. So they were drinking excessively, and they didn't realize how much they had consumed and how impaired they were.
Now, you said that at the time of the shooting, Defendant Chan was grossly intoxicated. What does grossly mean?
Well, 3 times the legal limit would be considered an excessive level of intoxication. There needs to be a term to describe what 3 times the legal limit is like. So that's the term I chose. That's the one that's usually used in the literature when you talk about people who are at the extreme end.
Now, if a person is a chronic drinker, in other words, they consume alcohol frequently, their ability to metabolize alcohol is going to be different than a person who is either a teetotaler or maybe just drink occasionally. Isn't that right?
The metabolism rate, yes, can get altered depending on the drinking habits. Usually you need to have someone drinking excessively and frequently to see that.
Okay. And you never talked to Defendant Chan, did you? I
did not.
So you don't know what his metabolic rate is, or how frequently he consumes alcohol, or if he consumes alcohol even at all, right?
I do not know that.
And you don't know what his percentage of body fat is?
I do not.
That would affect the absorption rate, right?
The body fat can affect, the calculations, yes.
Okay. And things like even a person's age can impact the metabolism of alcohol and absorption, isn't that right?
Right. So if you look at elderly people, the metabolism is different. It stays in the system longer. They're less efficient at metabolizing.
But you didn't look into any of that for this defendant, did you?
No, he's at the age range of most of my subjects.
Yeah, so you didn't look into it, right?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned that when you were evaluating the toxicology report for Deputy Martin, and you had no problem with that, you also stated that it's your belief that Defendant Chan and Deputy Martin basically consumed the same amount of alcohol that evening, right?
Not the same amount of alcohol, no.
And the only information that you have about the consumption of alcohol is based on the receipts.
Correct, and the witness statements.
Receipts and witness statements. Now, at one establishment, there was beer consumed, and it was served in a pitcher, right?
Correct.
And at other establishments, they were drinking shots.
Yes.
And you said that your estimation is that defendant consumed 6 to 7 Red Bulls, but those come in different sizes, don't they?
Generally, Red Bull is sold in the 250 ml can.
Can you let her answer the question?
Again, Mr. Day, she has to answer the question that's being asked.
She was wrong. You interrupted her.
Thank you, Mr. Day. I don't believe so. Listen to the question. Answer only the question. Restate the question.
Yes, no. Red Bull comes in different size containers, right?
It does.
There is no indication, the ratio in any of the witness statements or in any of the receipts, the ratio of beer that was consumed from that pitcher by defendant Chan or Mr. Martin is there.
That's correct. There's no information.
Now, you mentioned that a person's, concerning brain function, a person's emotional response and their awareness are all part of the lower brain function. Do I have that correct?
Their arousal level and their emotions are lower level functions, more middle of the brain.
And that middle of the brain controls areas where a person is basically going to be functional on habit. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, on habit, yes.
Habit and training, right?
Correct.
So, just like police officers who find themselves in a stressful situation, they're going to resort to their training, aren't they?
If something is really well learned, then yes.
So if a deputy's been on the SWAT team, it's really well learned, and they're going to resort to their training, right?
Perhaps yes.
I have one more, John.
Yes, go ahead.
Pass the witness round.
Thank you, Mr. Bars. Mr. Day, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Go ahead, proceed.
Dr. Martinsky, you were asked some questions by the lawyer for the district attorney's office about training and so on. Does the phrase muscle memory mean anything to you?
It would refer to any sort of reflexive, well-learned motor actions.
And are those reflexive actions, are they controlled by the lower part of the brain that you were talking about?
If it's a reflexive action, yes.
Okay, so do you believe that someone who is grossly intoxicated could still perform actions that were based on muscle memory?
Certainly.
And Doctor, you gave us a statement about Mr. Chan being grossly intoxicated. Could you tell us what you believe the range of blood alcohol levels would be for grossly intoxicated?
Well, I guess grossly intoxicated is a subjective term. I would probably consider anything over the legal limit to be intoxicated. So anything 0.08 to 0.125. And then I think once you get above, perhaps like 0.13 to 0.15, like, the functioning is going to be seriously deteriorated. At 0.24, you would normally expect people to be losing consciousness. So, it depends on the individual, but anywhere above 0.15, I'm starting to be concerned and might use the term grossly intoxicated.
But that's where the effects of the energy drinks might come into play at that point as well, too.
Correct.
And you told us you were giving us a range when you gave us Mr. Chan's blood alcohol content of, was it between 0.21 to 0.227?
Correct.
So that was the range that you had. And was that based on any variables? Is that why it's a range?
Yeah, so with incomplete information about body weight I ran the calculations with and without, with a higher or lower body weight. Early in the evening, it was unclear if they were served 2 pitchers at Hooters when they were eating or only 1. So my calculation only includes the 1 because there was only 1 on the receipt, but the waitress at the restaurant claims that there were 2, so I added in to make a higher range calculation for that based on the witness statement. So any of those discrepancies, one thing at a time, I reran the calculation to see how it changed the number to come up with that range.
But you're comfortable with the range being between 0.21 and 0.27? That takes into account the variables you just talked about.
Yes, that is a fairly wide range, and I think it encompasses all the sort of information I was provided that potentially could have influenced the estimate that I provided.
Okay, and if anyone from the district attorney's office had questions of you in the last year, you've been happy to answer them?
Absolutely.
But they never called you?
They did not.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Byers, is there any re-cross-examination on that limited redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, proceed, please.
Dr. Marchinsky, Mr. Day just asked you about muscle memory. And can you give the jury a brief explanation of muscle memory in your mind, please?
It can be anything as simple as if you have walked up a staircase and it's the staircase in your home many, many times, then after a period of time of walking up that staircase, you no longer need to look at the steps. It's sort of ingrained. It's like a habit. You know the depth, you know how many, and you don't really need to think about it.
Most people don't walk down steps backwards, right?
Correct.
This defendant didn't he?
I did not review that evidence, but I did hear it in court testified by the police officer.
And would it surprise you that Mr. Chan had a moving target?
Judge, that's beyond the scope of the limited redirect.
Well, I don't believe that it is because it still deals with the coordination at the level of testified to intoxication. Go ahead, respond to the question if you're able to.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I'll repeat it for you. Would it surprise you to know that Mr. Chan hit Deputy Martin 5 times out of 10 shots?
Relevance, Your Honor, objection.
Overruled.
My surprise, that's a difficult question. I think that knowing his training, he probably did a task like that or similar to that in training probably thousands of times. So there's a certain element to that being a practice skill. But then given his level of intoxication, that, we don't test people in the lab at that level of intoxication. So I really can't make a comment about what that.
Okay, but you said that at .24, you'd expect someone to be close to losing consciousness, right?
If they had consumed alcohol by itself, yes.
Mm-hmm. And the consumption of energy drinks enhances that in your estimation?
It doesn't enhance consciousness.
So even though you would expect a person to be at .24, close to loss of consciousness, this defendant was able to respond to police commands, hide in the stairs, and identify himself as a deputy. Does that sound to you? That sounds sort of like somebody close to unconsciousness?
As I testified, the energy drinks will lead to changes that you would expect different than what you would expect from alcohol by itself.
Now, with regard to fine motor skills and what we've been talking about concerning muscle memory, in your laboratory, you don't have people fire weapons, do you?
No, I do not. No one does, actually. There's no firearms research in the United States.
But You would agree with me, wouldn't you, that the discharge of the firearm, firing at the target requires sight acquisition, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't miss that term.
It requires sight
I
acquisition.
don't think this witness is qualified to testify to those issues. That's not why she's testifying. She doesn't qualify as a gun expert.
I'm going to sustain the objection because she's already testified to the fact that firearms aren't used as part of the testing. I don't believe that that would be an appropriate question for her to respond to. So go on to another. I'm going to sustain the objection.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Does the jury have any questions of this witness? Mr. Byers and Mr. Day, would you please approach?
Pardon me, I didn't get that question.
Okay. Let's say Tai Chan could have shown that gun to somebody else. Who touched it? Would a transfer, could a transfer take place?
Hypothetically, yes, sir.
And hypothetically, let's say there was a struggle over the weapon. A transfer could take place in that fashion also, is that correct?
Sure.
Now, in the first example or hypothetical I gave you, the gun could have been shown or handed to any number of different individuals who could not be excluded as a contributor to the minor component of the DNA. Is that correct?
If I had their DNA profile to compare, then I could make that interpretation, but since I was only given two, and all I can say is that so-and-so's DNA was present or could not be eliminated. I cannot tell you how exactly it got there.
Now, if we go back up to the watch,
Yes, sir.
and what number is that on your report?
It was item 46.
And was there any other description of the watch that was submitted to you? Other than the watch?
It was submitted as a black Seeker watch with a broken band.
Now, assuming once again that the minor contributor was a Caucasian, what was your calculation?
Again, before I send the attorneys back, should I expect any other questions? Thank you. Dr. Marcinski, the jury has questions of you, and remember, the jury is hearing the testimony for the first time, trying to acclimate to what has been discussed in both direct and cross-examination. So again, even if you feel that you may have responded in some way, the question is coming, so it means that, perhaps there may not be an understanding among the jury related to some of the prior responses. So, look at them as new questions and respond to them rather than all the question previously. Did you receive an Mr. Chance in order to test his blood?
When I
Okay, so again,
jury understands, just explain very briefly and as simply as you can, how then did you arrive at the blood alcohol level that you associated with Mr. Chen?
So you can determine the blood alcohol concentration by looking at how much alcohol was consumed at what time and taking into account the person's body weight using a standard equation that's been used for decades. And so taking into account the receipts of all the places that alcohol was purchased, at about what time, because the time was on the receipts, and taking into account the witness statements of what they saw and who they thought was drinking. That's how I came to my determination.
Okay, so that goes right into the next question. How do you definitely know who drank what?
You don't. For the most part, though, you can determine that if there are two people at a table and there's a receipt for, say, 6 beers, 3 of one kind, and make the assumption that probably one of the persons at the table drank the one kind of beer, and probably the other person at the table drank the other kind of beer.
And there's more than 2 people, how do you do that?
When there's more than 2 people, then it's more complicated, obviously, and so that's where I relied on the witness statements of who was drinking and what they thought was being consumed.
So again, even if a receipt shows a certain number of drinks at a table, you're unable to tell from the receipts who may have had more to consume. And so what you're doing is just a division of the alcohol among the individuals that you believe are at the table.
Yes.
And again, all of these questions are whether you're able to respond to them. How long do the effects of the energy drinks last when combined with alcohol?
Energy drinks have of action because that's the duration of action of caffeine. So if you consume it, then you have to add about 6 hours where you assume that.
Are you indicating that it dissipates or leaves the system slower than the alcohol would?
Yes, it's a little bit slower.
Did I hear your testimony to suggest 4 hours related to the alcohol? And now you're associating 6 hours to the energy drink?
The 4 hours refers to the food in the stomach, so not the alcohol. So to process food, you would want to, once you eat, it probably takes about 4 hours to exit into the small intestine and things like that.
All right, so you're associating, I'm just trying to get you to where, so there is a follow-up question. If an energy drink stays in your system before it begins to dissipate and show the reduction in its effect, how long does alcohol stay in the system before it starts dissipating?
You can metabolize alcohol only at a set rate. So if you were drinking approximately a drink an hour, it could leave the body, or it could significantly dissipate 1 drink per hour. So that would be faster than the caffeine action.
Could the combination, and again, this is whether it's within your expertise to answer, would the combination of energy drinks and alcohol cause?
I have a, so stimulants in general, so cocaine, for example, is another stimulant drug. It can induce hallucinations, but
here we seem to be dealing, again, you don't have any facts that have been provided to you that there was anything consumed other than alcohol, food, and energy drinks.
correct.
So within that hypothetical, do you believe that combination, not going off onto cocaine or other drugs, because there's no foundation for that guilt?
In it.
let's see, since Mr. Martin's blood alcohol concentration was accurate or documented at the time, does that mean the variables that you had to consider or that you considered for Mr. Chan could be considered accurate as well?
The fact that there was an autopsy number did help determine what was happening with Mr. Chan, because you have a set value for the one person. So it does assist you in being perhaps more accurate in your estimation of a...
So are you telling the jury that you took the blood alcohol concentration that was associated with Mr. Martin and applied it to Mr. Chan, and you did the calculations from that basis?
I didn't apply it for Mr. Chan, but what I did is I went through the evening of what I thought Mr. Martin had consumed, applied the same Widmark equation, and I came to a value that's pretty close to what the autopsy showed. So
You, again, but that was for Mr. Chan, not Mr. Martin.
I also ran the Widmark for Mr. Martin. I didn't testify to it, but I did run it.
Okay, so that's fine, but I just don't want the jury to be confused. Did your assessment, did you begin the basis of your calculations related to Mr. Chan based on the blood alcohol concentration of Mr. Martin?
The only aspect of Mr. Martin's number that I used was the reduction that I thought was appropriate for the food, because I
report that applied to Mr. Martin, you didn't use any of that in terms of calculating what you considered blood alcohol concentration.
So the number on the toxicology report is lower than what the Widmark would say, and the Widmark equation is based on an empty stomach. So the amount of blood alcohol that the Widmark was applied to Mr. Chan to reduce his blood alcohol concentration based on food. So that's how I use the toxicology report.
So maybe let's make it a little bit simpler. What blood alcohol concentration did you begin from in calculating or applying the factors and variables to Mr. Chan?
So the value I started with for Mr. Chan before reducing for food was 0.304.
Higher than what was associated to Mr. Martin.
Again, before I send the attorneys back, should I expect any other questions? Thank you. Dr. Morsinski, the jury has questions of you, and remember, the jury is hearing the testimony for the first time, trying to acclimate to what has been discussed in both direct and cross-examination. So again, even if you feel that you may have responded in some way, the question is coming, so it means that, perhaps there may not be an understanding among the jury related to some of the prior responses. So, look at them as new questions and respond to them rather than question or all the question previously.
you receive an extra chance in order to test his blood?
When I
Repetitive, but there's a different slant to the way the question is being asked by the Jew, but we're going to be talking about someone who you, if someone was at a lower level or even a higher level. How fast do the effects of someone with a 0.24 blood alcohol concentration level start to diminish? Can you give a time sequence?
8 a.m.
So can you do the calculation in terms of, to help the jury, at 8 o'clock in the morning, what would have been his
Oh, I'd have to.
level based on your calculation, even if it's just an estimation?
I need a calculator.
This is from the
So, it could be anywhere between like 10 o'clock and closer to midnight. There's some, it's unclear because you just on the receipt see where they closed at the tab.
And based again on the time sequence that you put together in the review of the documentation that was provided to you, are you able to answer whether Mr. Chan would have reached the legal alcohol limit? I'm assuming they're saying 0.08 before he started using alcohol involving the energy drinks that evening.
Unlikely because you've got about 6 standard drinks consumed before the first energy drink. But that was distributed across 2 hours, plus they ate. So I wouldn't want to say definitively he was above.
When the incident occurred, that Mr. Chan was at the 0.24 blood alcohol concentration level.
Being that it was the first time I met him, no.
Did it seem like a friendly situation, or was there anything that was unfriendly about it?
It seemed jokingly friendly.
If there were comments made that you overheard without getting into the content of it?
Yes.
That's the meeting.
Sustained because it was legal.
Were you able to hear any of the comments? Chan and Mr. Martin.
We went to Dublin's street pub.
What did you do when you got to Dublin's?
We went inside and we sat down at one of the tables in the bar area.
And after you sat down, were you joined by anybody else?
Later on in the evening, we were.
So after you first sat down, how many people were there until those other people joined?
There was 4 of us.
And were you working?
Yes.
Who wasn't drinking?
I was not drinking.
Why was that?
I designated myself as the driver.
Now, Mr. Rillis, can you tell us if the demeanor or the relationship between Mr. Chan and Mr. Martin changed once you got inside the bar?
Yes, it did.
Can you describe how it changed?
There was a slight conversation made, and at that time, Jeremy seemed to get upset about one of the comments that were made.
And did anything happen at that point when you got upset?
Yes.
What happened?
Jeremy, he had a cup of water that he slammed down on the table and walked out shortly after walked out.
Did he do anything with the water?
He slammed it on the table, and then that's when he walked out.
Could you describe in what manner he slammed it on the table?
Not with the exact force, but he had the cup in his hand standing, and he kind of set it down on the edge of the table that he was standing.
Did you describe his demeanor when he slammed the water down on the table?
He looked angry.
Angry?
Yes.
And where did he go after he slammed the water down?
Exact location, I do not know.
Now, did Jeremy Martin consume any alcoholic beverages in your presence?
Yes, he did.
Do you know what he was drinking?
There were orders of Fireball, whiskey, and also Red Bull vodkas.
What is Red Bull?
Red Bull is going to be an energy drink.
And what was it being mixed with?
Vodka.
And did Tai Chan have anything to drink out of it?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what he was drinking?
He was drinking Fireball and Red Bull vodkas as well.
And what is Fireball?
It's a whiskey.
Did you ever drink any alcoholic beverages out of it?
No, I did not.
At some point, did anybody switch to drinking water that night?
Yes.
Who was that?
Everyone, actually.
Do you recall what the conversation was before Jeremy Martin slammed down his water glass? Just asking if he remembers, if he heard the conversation, not what their content was.
What would you be asking him? What he heard the conversation if it wasn't?
Well, if you could hear the conversation, Judge, it's certainly relevant to something.
He's already testified that he's heard the conversations. Sustain the objection because, and again, I'm going to caution you, Mr. Robles, don't be testifying to what other people said. It's your actions and your observations.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Day.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Robles, when were you joined by these other people at the bar?
It was roughly 30 minutes after we arrived.
And who were the people who joined you?
It was Ty's cousin.
Do you remember that person's name?
I do not.
Was it a woman or a man?
It was a woman.
Now, was there ever a time where Tai Chan wanted to know where Jeremy Martin had gone?
Yes.
How did you know that?
Ty had showed me a text message.
What did it say?
Objection? Hearsay?
Sustained.
Without telling us what it said, were you able to see the message?
Yes, I was.
And were you able to see whether there was any response from Jeremy Martin without telling us what the response was?
Yes, I was.
Can you please describe what happened? Or was there a point where Mr. Martin came back into the bar?
Yes, there was.
And what happened when he came back into the bar?
He joined us back at the table.
And what was the demeanor like? What was Mr. Martin's demeanor like at that point?
Standoffish, kind of not really engaged in the conversation.
You said standoffish?
Yes.
What does that mean to you, that word?
Secluding oneself away from the group.
Was that what he was doing?
Yes.
Now, did you see whether or not there were any other exchanges that night between Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin?
Yes.
Without telling us what words were used, can you describe that to the jury?
Yes. They were on the opposite side of the bar. They were communicating between the two of them. And I looked over and I saw a conversation going on.
Did you get any feel for the demeanor of the people of Mr. Chan and Mr. Martin during that conversation?
No.
At that point, were you able to see whether Jeremy Martin and Tai Chan continued to drink these alcoholic beverages?
At that time, no.
Would it refresh your memory if you looked at your previous statement?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr.
This is transcript, page 15. So don't read this out loud, but just read it to yourself and starting it. And then going off to page 16. Does that help? So having looked at your previous testimony, Mr. Rose, does that refresh your memory?
Yes, it does.
And who were both men drinking?
Yes.
Now, were there any other exchanges that you were able to observe between Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin after that point?
Shortly after that, yes.
Did you, without using the words that either person used, could you tell us what that appeared to be to you?
So from what I had seen across the bar, Ty walked away and Jeremy followed, and then they started in conversation again on a different part of the bar.
Could you describe anything more about that encounter?
No.
You have a moment, Ron?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Day.
At one point, did you make any statements to Jeremy Martin about his behavior in the bar that night?
It was, I can't remember the exact time, but it was probably midway, halfway through the night.
Do you remember what you said to Mr. Martin?
Exact words, no.
Would it refresh your memory to see your prior?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
That's transcript page 25. 29. Okay, does that help? Having read your prior testimonies, Mr. Rose, do you recall the statements you made to Jeremy Martin?
Yes, I do.
What did you tell him?
I told him that he had been talking shit to Ty all night and that he should be able to take it back.
Did you suggest that he do something else?
I do not recall.
Can I approach the witness?
Go ahead, Mr. Day.
Okay.
Did that refresh your memory, Mr. Rose?
Yes, it did.
What else did you say to Mr. Martin?
That he should do the same.
That's a moment.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you're on the best orders.
Mr. D'Antonio, cross-examination of Mr. Rojas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rose. How are you?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Have you ever been drinking with Mr. Chan before that night of October 27, 2014?
Yes, I had.
Approximately how many times in the last, at that time, 2014, how many times previously have you been drinking with Mr. Chan?
Exact number I do not recall.
Is it more than 5?
Yes.
More than 10?
No.
And during those times, did you ever see Mr. Chan drink to excess?
On I would say 2 of the occasions.
Isn't it true that when Mr. Martin walked away after slamming the glass on the table, that Mr. Chan was upset about that and leaving? Isn't that true?
That Mr. Chan was upset?
Yeah, after Mr. Martin left, Mr. Chan was upset that Mr. Martin left. Is that true?
I wouldn't use the word upset, no.
Would you say that after Mr. Martin came back, after he left the bar area you were at, that he was trying to be the peacemaker at that point? Isn't that true?
Mr. Martin was not trying to be the peacemaker at that time, so no.
The answer is
No,
sir.
no, sir.
Would it refresh your memory if I showed you some prior testimony?
Yes.
Right, person witness?
Go ahead.
Sorry, sir. Sir, is your memory now refreshed?
Yes.
Let me ask you a question again. Did it appear to you at that point in time, when Mr. Martin came back to the table, he was acting as a peacemaker?
It wasn't after. It wasn't when he came back to the table, but yes.
And when was it, sir? I apologize.
It was after Ty had walked away from Jeremy from across the bar. That when Jeremy followed, when they got closer, I overheard the conversation, and that's when he was trying to be the peacemaker.
Is it true that for the rest of the evening that Mr. Chan and Deputy Martin were very friendly?
Yes.
And isn't it true that he never got physical? Is that right?
That's correct.
And it's also true, sir, that by the time he left the bar, in your opinion, everything was fine, and Chan and Deputy Martin were cool.
Yes.
And it's also true that they did have a little bit of disagreement during the night. By the end of the night, they totally made up.
In my opinion, yes.
Your opinion. So I'm asking for your opinion.
Yes.
However, you did say that there was still a slight tension in there. Is that right?
Yes.
But is it true that that tension was overridden by their actions, which are overtly friendly and compassionate? Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Day, for direct examination of Mr. Robles.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Robles, the section of your testimony that the attorney for the DA's office showed you never used the words peacemaker, did you?
No, I did not.
Those are his words, right?
Yes.
In fact, was Mr. Chan also acting?
I haven't heard the question.
Was Mr. Chan also acting the same way that Mr. Martin was at that stage?
Sustained. Rephrase your question.
Well, how was Mr. Chan acting based on the section of your testimony that Mr. Attorney for the District Attorney's Office showed you? That refresh your memory to see that again?
Yes, it would.
I approach you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Robles, now that you've had a chance to look at your testimony, how was Mr. Chan behaving at that time?
In the same manner.
And that man was what?
Friendly.
Does the jury have any questions? Oh,
No, I have no question.
do you have any more cross-examination? I'm sorry, Mr. Gibbons. Does the jury have any questions for this witness? May Mr. Day, may Mr. Robles be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. D'Antonio, do you have any objection to Mr. Robles being excused?
No, Your Honor, I do not.
Mr. Robles, thank you for your testimony. You're free to leave and you have no further responsibilities.
Thank you.
Mr. Day or Mr. Clark, your next witness.
Josh, thanks, Your Honor.
Thank you. If you bring him forward, please.
He's coming in, Your Honor. He's just outside the door.
And Mr. Rourke, you'll be handling the cross-examination of the witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Sexauer, good afternoon. Join us over here at the witness chair, will you please? Before you sit down, however, let me ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you. Please sit down and you can adjust the microphone, come on to it, and adjust it to whatever height you need. Begin this afternoon by giving us your complete name and the spelling of your last name.
It's Joshua Robert Sexauer, Sexauer.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, you can commence with your direct examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sexauer.
Good afternoon.
Could you start off by telling the jury where you live?
The address or Las Cruces?
Well, the town.
Las Cruces.
And what's your profession?
I'm an operations research analyst at White Sands, New Mexico.
You're a board there, President?
Yes,
Are you married to anyone, or do you have a significant other?
I do. I'm married to Susanna Sexauer.
And were you married to Susanna Sexauer back in 2014?
We were married in 2014, so part of it.
In October of 2014, were you married?
Yes, at the beginning of October.
So you were recently married were you recently married on the 27th of October?
Yes,
Do you know Mr. Tai Ching?
I do.
Can you identify him very important today?
Right there.
For the record, say-
The glasses on the right.
And tell the jury how you know Mr. Ching.
I've been friends with him since we were in about third grade.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And did you attend school together or something?
Yes, we attended elementary school together, and we also attended college together. So there was a break where we didn't see each other as much.
Well, let me ask you about that. There was a break.
Yes.
And when did you become reappointed with Mr. Chan?
It was freshman year of college.
Now, you said you were married to Susanna Sexauer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Please say yes or no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Is there a connection in any way between Ms. Sexauer and your present wife, Tai Chan?
Yes, they were previously married.
And do you know how they were divorced, right?
Yes, they were divorced.
And then you were married to Ms. Sexauer, right?
Yes.
And what was her maiden name of Ms. Sexauer?
Chan. Oh, I'm sorry. Her maiden name is Gonzalez, and then Chan.
Have the three of you remained acquaintances throughout the entire period of time?
Yes.
Now, you indicated previously that you were acquainted with Mr. Chan in college, right?
Yes.
And you remember meeting Mr. Chan, seeing Mr. Chan in October of 2014?
Yes.
Tell the jury the circumstances under which, or the circumstances of your meeting on October 27th, 2014.
Ty and Jeremy Martin were transporting a prisoner, and they called me and said they were going to come to Las Cruces to see if we wanted to hang out.
Was this an anticipated call, or was it out of the blue, or something?
It was pretty out of the blue. I don't think it's been a while now, but I don't think I actually received the call till they were in Las Cruces.
And I don't need to hear any of the basis of the conversation, but were plans made to go out?
Yes.
During the course of that planning to go out on that evening, did you contact anyone else?
Yes, my friend Ian Robles.
And were arrangements made as to who would drive?
Yeah, Ian was going to drive. He was going to stay sober that night and be our designated driver.
And how were you going to all go out? Whose car?
In Ian's car.
And were arrangements made to pick up Mr. Chan and Mr. Martin?
Yes.
How were those arrangements made?
We were going to go pick them up from their hotel.
When you arrived at the hotel, who was in the vehicle?
Me and Ian were in the vehicle.
And who did you meet when you got to the hotel?
Ty and Jeremy.
Have you ever met Mr. Martin before?
No.
And based on previous communications, I'm talking about there, but was there a specific location you were going to go out that night?
Yeah, I guess we decided to go to, must have decided to go to Dublin's at some point.
Okay. When you first picked up, when you and Ian first arrived at the hotel, and Mr. Martin and Mr. Chan got in the car, was there anything unusual?
They both seemed intoxicated to me already.
And did anybody say anything that was out of the order?
Yes, Jeremy.
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Jeremy opposed.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Burke.
Very nice person, I guess.
Would it refresh your recollection to see a copy of former testimony to know exactly what you said before?
Sure.
Approach witness.
Or was this recorded in
Yep.
related to law enforcement in any interview?
No, it's recorded in the previous sworn testimony.
All right, go ahead.
Page 33. No, I'm sorry. 230.
Highlighted portion. And I'm looking at lines 2, 3, and 4.
Does that refresh your recollection? That's what your impressions of Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Tell the jury what your impressions were in your own words.
Kind of a jerk and an ass.
That's what you showed.
Thank you. Mr. Rourke, any cross-examination of Mr. Sexton?
It'll be very brief. Now,
Mr. Sexton, I believe your testimony really, hold on. Your testimony is really to the jury.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That way you position yourself in the microphone next when you're I mean, you have a good voice, a strong voice, but still, turn it around a little bit. You can listen to the question and give the jury your...
I apologize. I'm not aware.
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tai Chan was a childhood friend, correct?
Yes.
Going back to what age?
The third grade, that's 8, 9.
And would you say you were best friends?
At that point, probably.
Now, you went to different middle schools and high schools, correct?
Yes.
And then you became very good friends again in college.
Yes.
New Mexico State University.
Yes.
In fact, you became such good friends that you lived together, correct?
Yes.
You were members of the same fraternity, right?
Yes.
Now, when did you start living together in college?
My third year in college, junior year, the 2008.
And what year of college was that for the defendant?
Also junior year.
And did you live together for that entire year?
Yes.
How about the following year?
No.
Now, you've been in situations on prior occasions when the defendant has been drinking alcohol, correct?
Yes.
Approximately how many occasions?
Several. Does that answer that well enough?
More than 5?
More than 5.
More than 10?
More than 10.
More than 15?
More than 15? Probably. I don't know if I could. I don't know. Over all the years that we were in college and everything, I don't know if I could give you an accurate numerical estimate.
Have you ever observed Mr. Chan when he's become intoxicated?
Objection, relevance, new approach.
Overruled. When he's become intoxicated, when he's become argumentative?
Yes.
Over the years that you've known him, approximately how many times have you seen him becoming argumentative?
Very few. I could probably quantify that as about 2.
Now, when he's become argumentative, would he yell, scream? What would he do?
I don't remember a lot of yelling or screaming so much as just pretty standoffish. I don't know how better to describe it than...
Okay. Have you ever seen him become involved in a physical altercation or fighting?
Objection, relevance. We've already addressed this before.
The direct was very expensive. Overruled.
Not to my knowledge. No, I have not seen him get into a fight.
Now, before the evening of October the 27th of 2014, you had never met Jeremy Martin before.
No.
The booth was light on the way to Dublin's, correct?
Correct.
According to you, let's try to put this in the time frame of the evening. You said it turned dark. Is that correct?
I don't remember using the word dark.
What did you use? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Maybe I did use dark. It seems like that word has too much connotation for what it turned, but it was. I was.
Over, respond. Listen to the question. Just respond to the question.
All right, I apologize. Let's go with dark.
It became dark.
The mood changed.
Okay. Approximately what time? Well, I'll put it in this context. Approximately how long after you had been in Dublin's did the mood change, become different?
I believe it was around 30 minutes, between 30 minutes and an hour.
Now, after you noticed that, how much longer did you stay at Dublin's?
Probably 30 minutes to an hour after that.
But also, you will agree with me that during the direct examination, When you left, your observations of Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin was basically they had reconciled, everything was okay.
I don't know if everything was back to okay, but it had calmed down. They seemed better.
Were they sitting at the same table?
I don't remember.
Do you know if they were? Do you know where they were?
When we left, no.
Prior to leaving, would you say that everything had calmed down?
It had calmed down some.
They weren't arguing with each other?
Not that I saw when I left.
And at no time during the course of that evening did you see any type of physical altercation between the two of them, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that when you got to the hospital you were hysterical, correct?
Yes.
And you were asked to stay around because a detective wanted to speak with you, correct?
Yes.
Which you did, correct?
I didn't speak to a detective at the hospital, but eventually, yes.
Now, based upon your own knowledge, you do not know how much longer both the defendant and Jeremy Martin stayed at Dublins.
I do not know.
And isn't it true that Dublins is not your favorite place, or wasn't your favorite place back then?
For the amount of people that go there.
To areas.
Let me make sure I get this right. So, 56 p.m. Ty calls Leah.
Ms. Garcia, make sure that you're speaking into the microphone, please.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that call lasted 12 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the second call, that was at 12:08 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Who initiated that call?
Actually, Leah Tafoya's phone. It doesn't tell me who's holding the phone.
Certainly. And how long? Let me make sure I get this right. So, 56 p.m. Let me make sure I get this right. So, 56 p.m. Ty calls Leah.
Ms. Garcia, make sure that you're speaking into the microphone, please.
At 11:56 p.m., Ty calls Leah. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that. Okay. Let me make sure I get this right. So, 56 p.m. I want to make sure that this is accurate. So we have the first call was actually connected to Ty called Leah, right?
Objection to the form of this question.
I'm going to allow Ms. Garcia flexibility in terms of creating.
Yes, that log is here. There are no messages between Tafoya and Chan in that log.
Just the phone calls during that period of time that we're discussing.
Right, the contact between Chan and Tafoya was confined to voice.